And
Um,
you're going to hear my baby babble in the background. I know you and I have gone back and forth on trying to find a date and time. So yesterday I was like, you know what? Let's just do it. It's going to be really real. Luna might
pretty
make an
sure
appearance.
myself and all of our listeners are okay with baby babbles. No worries. So Dr. Serena Rosa, you are an OBGYN nurse practitioner. You're a certified lactation consultant. You're an Ayurvedic postpartum doula, and you have a doctorate in nursing and where you've studied postpartum healing. And you also incorporate mindfulness and spiritual healing into your practice. So
Yes.
very excited to dive into this today. Thank you for coming.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I was telling you offline, we have a lot of listeners who are mommies. We have a lot of listeners who are in postpartum right now. I would really just love to dive into, how did you get where you are? What do you really like to focus on? And really dive into like, what are the most common challenges you see women go through? Um, and in general, just, you know, what is your most common advice? Because I feel like when my friend, I don't have children, but when my friends, all of them have gone through their postpartum phase and they feel like they're alone. Every single one of them, every single time, feel like they're the only one going through whatever that is, right?
Mm,
And it's really a powerful time. So I'll stop yapping and let you kind of take the
mm,
stage.
mm. Thank you so much. So to answer your question, how did I get here? For the first decade of my universal and master degree studies, I was very much focused on science, medicine, nursing. I really wanted to work in clinics and be a clinician and be part of healthcare. And I really dedicated my life to that. I loved it. Working in OBGYN is so special because I always say that OBGYN providers, they're kind of half providers, but also like half therapists, half friends. Like, my patients would wait like all year for their annuals and we'd catch up in clinic. And it was so beautiful. And I loved that part of my life. And when I had my first son, I realized in my postpartum how inadequately I had been preparing my patients for what postpartum is.
Yeah.
And this is coming from someone who used to teach breastfeeding courses, and I'm on faculty at university to teach breastfeeding classes, postpartum healing classes. And then when I went through it myself, I realized there was so much that I wasn't teaching or knew about. The books and the science is just like one little part of it. And actually, to tell you the truth, Jessica, I really learned that like there was so much that I intuitively knew that was actually going against what the books and the science said. And so there was this battle, right? Of I want to do what's best for my baby, but I have all of these feelings and I'm changing and my mind is changing. I'm evolving as a person. And so that's when I really decided that it was in my doctorate program at that time. And that's when I decided to really study the science between the mind body connection. And I learned a lot about I want to say mindfulness, that's such a broad term, but I really learned a lot about how our energy determines our thoughts, which determines, our actions, which determines our reality. We've all heard that before, right? But I actually got to look at the science in it. And I actually got to do cool studies like what happens when you visualize breastfeeding in terms of like your outcomes, or when you visualize labor and delivery, like what does that do with like outcomes of birth trauma? And so in the meantime, of course, I've invested in like spiritual mentors and been practicing more of my spirituality. So I love to incorporate that into my work. The second question you asked me about why does it feel like people are alone? I would answer that question by saying this. One thing that I've really learned through studying postpartum healing practices around the world is one thing that's certain is that it was never meant to be done alone.
Yeah.
Postpartum healing and postpartum life was always designed to be done in communities, meaning the birthing person was doing skin to skin and feeding the baby, but the community was taking care of them and cooking for them and nurturing them and slowing down life for them. And we've lost a lot of that. It's funneled down to the responsibility of one, sometimes two people, and that feels incredibly crushing, but also incredibly isolating.
Yeah.
Because we believe that we're supposed to be able to do it. We're supposed to be able to do all the things. And when we get to the point where we feel like, wait a second, this is heavy and too heavy for me to carry, it can feel very lonely.
Right. And you're not only going through physical changes, right? Your body has completely, it grew a human and it's miraculously created this baby human, but now you're trying to figure out this new body that you've never had. And then it's also quite a mental hit, right? Your emotions and your hormones are just going through massive changes. And so it can hit you pretty hard from a depression perspective as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A metaphor that I like to use is, for example, let's say you decided to immigrate to another country. You left everything you knew and you went to somewhere new for better opportunities, for exciting adventures. And when you get there, you're in this limbo of like, you know what you left behind, but you're unsure of what is going to be. That's very much how postpartum
really good.
feels.
Yeah, that just gave me the chills, and I don't even have kids. That's really good. I feel like that would help a lot of people sort of ground in their isolation to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I have immigrated to a different country.
Yeah. And the key then is to look at I'm not sure what's going to be with excitement and curiosity, versus anxiety and angst.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot easier said than done. So so people come to you for several things. It sounds like your practice has changed. So what is, generally speaking, do the women come in while they're pregnant, postpartum specifically? I saw some of your programs online.
Yeah. It's interesting. The majority of people come to me because they are either in the depth of their postpartum, they're going through depletion, anxiety, exhaustion, loneliness. They reach out to me. Or they've had a very traumatic labor, delivery, postpartum. Now they're pregnant again.
Yeah.
They reach out to me and they say, I want to do something different this time around.
Yeah.
It's very rare that I get the person who's pregnant for the first time and they're like, I want to just do your course to be prepared. So I'm working on ways to to kind of create offers and speak to that person. But one of the things that I think about all the time is, does that person even know that they need that program, right? And so it's,
I mean, you said even yourself in the industry and in the profession, you didn't even know, right? Until it was real time. So
exactly.
Yeah. What are some examples of some things? We know we just kind of talked about like some anxiety things, but there's so many things involved here, from breastfeeding down to, having a traumatic birth and healing from that, right? Because I mean, your body is literally healing. I know several people that had a traumatic experience, and my hairdresser's pregnant again, and I could barely hear what happened to her. It was so traumatic. So I think, I think it would be interesting to sort of share some common things, challenges that women have. I know there's a plethora of them, but I wonder if there's a few common examples we could discuss.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one thing to note is that, like you said, you are pregnant for 9 months, and then everybody talks about like labor and delivery as like the act, like what you are waiting for, what you're preparing for. And while that's really important, postpartum healing spans, we often say in medicine, we say the body takes 12 months to recover. That's why we ask you to space your pregnancies out at least a year. So there's recovery and change happening for 12 months. And then more acutely, the first 40 days, or here we say, 6 weeks. Other cultures say like the golden or the honorable 40 days, the magical 40 days. Your body is going through the most amount of changes it will ever experience in a lifetime, with the exception of when you are 0 to 1 years old. So in those 40 days, your brain is actually going through the most amount of neural synapse changes. And so what that means for people can vary, from various degrees. Some people find that they actually, I want to just put this out there for anybody, just to also let them know that this is also a possibility, that they actually feel the best they've ever felt in postpartum, because pregnancy was so heavy and hard and exhausting for them. So that is something that I've heard. But generally speaking, what people experience in postpartum, sleep deprivation is a huge one.
Yeah.
It's a huge one, and it amplifies all physical physical things that are physically uncomfortable are amplified by sleep deprivation. So that's a really big one. Trauma, right? So your body's just gone through something traumatic, and that's not to scare anybody about like, oh, birth is a trauma, but your body has just gone through something, you know? And so sometimes, you know, there's a large amount of oxytocin that happens after delivery, which is like your feel good and bonding hormone. And sometimes people feel like they're in a postpartum bliss and a postpartum like honeymoon. And sometimes the oxytocin doesn't kick in because of interventions that happened, or, you know, various things that can happen in the hospital, or fear, or anything that kind of inhibits oxytocin would be things like stress, lots of light, little sleep, things that are uncomfortable, right? And so a lot of times that also can amplify trauma. And then lastly, what I will say is there's that piece of now you have this baby who is the most important thing in your world, so vulnerable, and you are responsible for taking care of it. And that can I've seen that really become a challenge sometimes, particularly to my clients who've had past traumas when they were babies or children, and you look now at your child and you realize like no one deserved that, right? So it's such a mirror. Postpartum is such a mirror for what you have experienced. So there's the emotional, the physical, and the mental piece. I look at them as like a Venn diagram where they all kind of connect in some way.
Interesting. Yeah. So, okay. So you are a nurse practitioner, OBGYN, you are a doula, and then you also incorporate this spiritual wellness, wholesome body, right? Like just like mindfulness. What specifically are you focused on these days? What is kind of like the next chapter for you?
Well, thanks for asking that question. It's such an exciting question to answer. So I am transitioning more into my business and less in clinic. I work per diem in clinic, which means like I go when I'm needed.
Yeah.
I'm teaching now, which I love to do at MGH, Institute for Health Professionals. But as my business evolves, one thing that actually is going to be coming out next year, which I'm really excited to share, is more options for partners to be involved in the programs. Because like you said, like we just talked about, community is really important. And after 2 years of working with, you know, the pregnant person and the postpartum person in my programs and my offers, I often hear from, you know, my clients, this work is amazing. It's so uplifting. I love coming to the calls. But at the end of the day, Serena, my computer turns off and I go back to my life. And I have a partner that sometimes doesn't always make me feel supported, or doesn't always meet my needs, or I'm feeling like I can't communicate even what those needs are. And so next year, a program called Expecting Together is going to be launching so that people can bring their partners and their support people. You know, there's research that shows, I mean, this isn't like groundbreaking research. I think we've all know this, but like the level of anxiety somebody experiences in postpartum is directly correlated with the lack of support they have. So to say that in another way, the more support somebody has, the less likely they're going to have anxiety. And what that funnels down to for me is the quality of the kind of parent you get to be. Yeah. Is related to the support that you have in your life.
That's interesting, because I'm trying to think if I can think of an outlier here, but most of my friends that have given birth really wanted to be alone the first couple of weeks, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting that you're saying community, but I would imagine, and again, a lot of this is assumption here based on my conversations with them, but you know, your body has gone through such trauma, and mentally you really have no idea how to communicate what's happening, because it's all new for you, right? It's a new emotion, a new feeling. And so they don't want people around because, you know, whether it's their mother-in-law or just whatever family or friends, because I think in their mind, they're trying to figure out what the routine is, what those emotions are, what those feelings are. Would based on, again, the research you just talked about, would you advise against that? Would you advise more so to be open to community help, or how would you explain that? And again, everyone's going to be different, but
you bring up a great point, and I'd like to get a little specific here. Absolutely, yes. Wanting to have your private space and your boundaries when you're early postpartum, and wanting to be kind of in your nuclear family, you're touched out a lot, you're often like breastfeeding, your body's healing, you're bleeding, there can sometimes be like, physical, mental, emotional exhaustions, and it's not the right time and place certainly to have a lot of outside. Even sometimes my clients say, like, even the TV sometimes can be really triggering and too much. What I mean actually though about being in community or partnership that's supportive, there is nothing that actually helps more to heal trauma than to be in community with people who've gone through the same thing as you. And actually, trauma is relational. So trauma always happens in relationship with somebody or something else. You cannot just lift trauma off of yourself. You cannot, no disrespect to these modalities I'm about to spew, but you can't do a meditation, hypnosis, yoga class and be like, okay, I've healed myself, right? You have to do it either with somebody else or with community or with a support person, because it's only there that you feel kind of safe enough to release that, if that makes sense. It's kind of like giving yourself a massage, like, yes, but and so there's so many groups that have been studied in the past, soldiers, victims of the Holocaust, and people who've gone through medical trauma, that when they are with other people who've experienced what they have, they don't even need to talk about like the trauma or what happened. They just, even being in each other's presence, even just talking about the weather, even just playing cards is healing within its own right. And that's what I find often in my group program at the Postpartum Abuse Mentorship. We meet once a week virtually, and it's one of the most beautiful hours of my week, because yes, we go into things and people ask questions and we talk, but most of the time it's just a group of people that you're safe to be around without any judgment, and you can show up as you are, where you are, and feel safe.
I love that. Yeah, that's the reason I have this podcast. I mean, being the founder of a deodorant company is great, and I love my product, but that it's not just about the product. It's ultimately like creating a group of people to come together to feel safe in their bodies. It's the only body we have. And you should not feel shame about your body. 68% are size 14 and up. And so it's a different group of people, but that my intention with creating this podcast is what the body, like, let's talk about all the body stigmas. Let's talk about, all the things, because, we've talked about this in several other episodes, but you're never alone in something you're going through. Someone has always gone through that thing, as crazy as it may feel or sound or be. It's like, you are not alone. And I think coming up, I feel very strongly that, 2020, we all went through it, right? 2021, 2022, we're like, okay, we're going to put hard pants back on. And now it's like 2023, we're back in it. Like, what the hell just happened over the last 3 years, And so I think everybody is dealing with their own version of trauma. And I love to focus on this specific postpartum, but you have to have a community of people that you feel safe around to be yourself, as crazy as you think it is, as different as you think it is, as hard as you think it is. Right. And I do yoga and meditation and the like, but without therapy, trauma doesn't lift. And whether therapy is your friends or your community or your therapist or your medium or whatever the person is that you lean on. So I think this translates into a lot of things, but I think everyone listening can relate to that for sure.
Yeah, we are meant to be in community. We're relational beings.
Yep. So you personally, right? You've had 2 children, I think.
I have 2 children. I'm in the midst of my postpartum right now. My baby girl is 8 weeks old.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. Yeah. So personally, I mean, look, you've got the education, you've got the science, you've got the school, you've got the experience. What has been the hardest part for you of postpartum?
This postpartum, I will say the hardest part has been, and I'll be really vulnerable and open, but it has been the changes my body has gone through, which is why I said yes to this podcast with an 8-week-old baby, because I felt like, this is the time to speak on it, not as an expert, but just as somebody who is actually going through it, and to speak about my experience. There's so many parts of this postpartum that are actually really beautiful and different than my first postpartum. With my first postpartum, the hardest thing was feeling safe to slow down and rest. I could never let go of that, like hustle. What am I doing next? What do I got to do? And it's kind of like an adrenaline detox is what I was going through with my first postpartum, or in spiritual terms, it's kind of moving from a masculine driven energy to more of that feminine energy, and not in a gendered way, but in a way to say like that energy that allows things to just come to you divinely in their own right time, in their own right way. And you trust that there's something greater than you, or guiding you, or besides you, or supporting you, so that you can let go of the grip a little bit. That was the hardest part of my first postpartum.
Okay. And this postpartum is the changes your body has gone through. Okay.
Yeah. So I will say that with my first, you know what, let me go grab Luna real quick. Hold on one second. Let me bring her. So even as unprofessional this may be, this actually, I really want to show you her, because I feel like every time I am hard on my body, or I feel like my body's not where it needs to be, I look down at her, and she's so perfect, and she's so healthy, and she's just like
she's
a
your
blessing on earth, you know?
She's your medicine when you're in your head about your body.
Yeah. I think also, you know, something that helped me a lot, because there was a lot of like negative self-talk, we'll say that. Something that really helped me is, I thought, what if somebody was saying this to her? And that felt so silly. It was like, what? Nobody would ever tell her, like, oh my gosh, like you know, you have like a fat face. Like, nobody would ever say that to her. And if they did, that would sound so crazy, you know?
So why are we saying it to ourselves?
So why are we saying it to ourselves? Yeah.
That's great. I love the symbolism of going to get her, so that it's like it's a reminder of like your body is a miracle. It is a miracle, and it created this human life, the second human life.
Yeah. And I think for anyone who's also a breastfeeding parent, one thing that I think about is, you know, because, you know, in terms of eating, you know, in postpartum, you feel hungry all the time, even more than when you're pregnant, actually. And so there's this like weird like narrative in your head that's like, I'm hungry, but I just ate, and should I be eating again?
Right.
And then I look at her and I'm like, my breast milk is growing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I need to eat, you know? And so it is a lot of just grace, an incredible amount of grace that you have to be able to give yourself in this time period. And even if you're not breastfeeding, actually, in terms of, you know, the Ayurvedic doula practices that I do, nutrition is truly how your body comes back to life. It's how you heal after trauma and birth. And there's nothing that's more important than nourishing your body.
Yeah. Food is medicine. Food is medicine. So I what I was going to say, and piggybacking off of that, was specifically what you hear in your head in the negative self-talk often, more than not, comes from society's expectations of what's in the magazines. You know, you have to be a size 2, or you're fat, which then has a negative connotation. You know, the word fat does not have a negative connotation. Society has given it that, right? Rolls are okay. Eating is okay. Splurging sometimes is okay. Having pizza, right? Like, that's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. So I just think, remembering in your head that, like, to whose standards are you criticizing yourself, right? Whose standards are these? You know, and I think it's just important to remember, it's like the patriarchy, thin white female is the ideal human being, and it's just not that way, and it isn't that way in reality. And it's just getting everyone's mind out of this forced Victoria's Secret size 0 tall, right? And
Yeah.
you know, it's just allowing for, I love the term allowing for grace and allowing your body to heal from a miracle. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
every woman goes through it that gives birth, every
Yeah.
single human being. I don't care if they're the most fit, quote unquote, and bounce back. They go through it too, right?
Yeah.
Everybody goes through it. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you are you actively I mean, you're in postpartum, but how would people contact you? Like, would they contact you to be their doula? Would they contact you for, I mean, which of these things I'm curious to see, because I bet people are very interested in sort of what that means and
Yeah.
what is active in your
Oh,
profession.
thank you. Yeah. Before I share how people can reach me, can I share just one quick thing that I wanted
Do,
to talk about in terms of mindset and body?
please.
Um, so as I had mentioned in my doctorate degree, I had studied the connection with mind body. When you apply that to weight loss or weight, or just any general thing,
Yeah.
what's interesting is that when you use terms like I need to lose weight or I have to lose weight or anything that's like very dire like that,
Yeah.
what the brain perceives that is actually like urgency, like something bad is happening, like flight or fight,
Yeah.
or adrenaline, cortisol, life or death, right? When that happens, our metabolism actually slows down because we're preserving for this threat that we are saying to ourselves that we have. And things like our heart rate goes up and our jaw gets tense. We're preparing for this, again, imaginary threat.
Right.
And
Cortisol.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so the language that I am trying to use these days is I'm okay if I'm like this, and I'm also okay if I'm smaller. And if I'm bigger, it would be cool to be smaller. And it's not a need, it's a want. I'm
Right.
already perfect and beautiful as I am. Wouldn't it be cool to be smaller? So kind of like play around with it. Like it's okay. It's kind of like that energy of like manifestation, which you don't want to cling too hard on something because you suffocate it. You're like, it's cool if I have it, it's cool if I don't, I'm curious about it, but I'm good either way.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm sure I can't wait to listen to more of your episodes. I'm sure you've touched on that self-love piece.
Yeah.
It's really amazing how when you love your body, you start to see a body that you love. Like it reflects back to you.
Yeah. When you, yeah, there is a, it's almost, I'll call it leveling up when you accept and you love, self-love, and you incorporate people who, you know, support you in that and have that same mindset. It's almost like you level up into a different, almost just a different mindset, in that you're more open to things, more joy, more opportunities, more love comes your way, and you become a better person, right? You become calmer, you become accepting, and all that means to the universe is to give you more of that, more
Yeah.
joy, more love, more
Yes.
acceptance, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I
Universe will always say yes. It
yeah,
always says yes to you. It more of whatever you're doing. So if you're restricting and you're going through, a harsh negative self-talk about your body, universe will only give you more, more of that, right? And so, now if somebody's listening to this, they may very well be like, yeah, that's so much easier said than
for
done,
sure.
right?
It is.
And I think, this is where I love that you reminded listeners, like, you're not alone in this. Everybody's going through this. It doesn't make you a bad person or wrong or strange or inadequate because you're feeling this way. It's a common experience. Like I said, you're immigrating to a new land, and that means a new body too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can look at it as like, I can't wait to see, like, I'm curious about what this is, right? Versus like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to be,
Right.
that size again? I do a lot of work in my mentorship about like pleasure and sexuality and libido, because I feel like there's so much of that that can actually get like better, and you can feel deeper and feel more alive in your body. I believe that that's possible.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the way that you look. It has all to do with, you know, believing you're deserving of it, knowing that
Yes.
you're deserving of it.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I've suffered from anxiety a lot, and you know, a lot of the people that have been on the podcast, we've talked about this, but you know, it really is just a denial of your ego being present, right? Your ego comes and says, you know, you look terrible, or I'm going to spike your cortisol because you should be anxious right now because you're not good enough for this. Whatever the false negative beliefs in your head that are happening, and it's okay just to be like, thank you. I don't need you. I'm not accepting that anxiety. I'm not accepting that self-talk, right? It's like, you don't want to just like be like, oh, the voices are there again, right? Or the negative self-talk is there again. You just say, thank you for coming. I don't need you anymore. You're
Yeah.
not helping me. You're not right. Like, it's almost this sort of like meditative discussion you're having with your ego that's showing up and trying to bring you down, if you will, right? And
Yeah.
I think, you know, just not allowing it and saying, no, thank you. I'm just going to let that pass, right?
Love that.
And that's been what I have personally done with my anxiety. Is like, no, you wake up in the middle of the night, it's 2 o'clock, and it's like emergency. It's not
Right.
emergency. Um,
Right.
just saying, nope, there's nothing to be concerned with here. Thank you very much. Right. I feel
Right.
anxious. I'm not, you know, you say I am anxious. It's like, I don't use that
Right. Right.
vernacular. It's like, I
Yeah.
feel anxious.
Yeah.
Thing to be
Yeah.
anxious over here, you know, whatever
Yeah.
that is for you.
Absolutely. And, you know, I want to just say that that's not spiritual bypassing or emotional bypassing. It's not like what it is, it's knowing that it's not a productive emotion, right? Like the anxiety, like I was saying, it's going to make your jaw clench. It's going to increase your blood pressure. It's not going to help increase your intuition and help increase like your cognitive thinking, right? And so those are things you need to figure out, well, why am I anxious, or what is the solution to this?
Yeah.
And when you can recognize, well, actually this anxiety isn't going to help me find that answer, it's
Right.
actually going to do the opposite, right?
Right. Is this
You know,
negative
doctor,
self-talk about my body going to make me, you know, happy? No, it's actually going to make you more depressed.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
a choice. It's a hard choice, because it's easier to go down the road of just like, let's just beat myself up. You know?
yeah, yeah. There
So
are times where I truly have to remind myself and my clients, you are not being chased by a lion right now. Like, you are not being attacked by anything. I know that sounds silly, but those are why the nervous system was created, to have parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, so that one was about rest and digest, and one was about, you know, being alert for threat.
yeah,
But we have evolved to be alert for threat even at 3 a.m. when we're in our bed.
yeah,
And so it can be really powerful to just remind yourself, rest my jaw, take
yeah,
a few deep breaths. Like, the power of deep breathing really helps bring the nervous system back to a place where then you can lean into your intuitive thinking versus like that flight or fight thinking.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I want to get to how people can contact you
yes.
and what all of that is, but I also want to ask you, I think this is a good segue. You know, one of the things that a lot of women ask me personally about and email the company about is, you know, odor down there and how
Yeah.
change
Let's
postpartum.
talk about the product.
Let's,
Yes.
yeah, let's talk about it, because I really, I value your opinion. I think our
Thank you.
listeners will too. And, you know, from, you know, an OB nurse practitioner, you know, tell me, I know you've used it. What would you
Reviews
advise
are-
people like to talk to
Yeah.
me about that and odor down there? Let's talk about
Yeah.
it.
I'm so proud of this product. I have to say, when you reached out to me, I said yes to the product because I loved the mission of your brand.
Yeah.
And I just skimmed your profile. I loved the language you were using. To be really honest, I'm actually the kind of person who doesn't always wear deodorant. I'm Italian. I like to not put things on my body. And
Yeah.
so I unless, like, you know, most of the times, like when I'm home and, you know, I can get away with not wearing deodorant. In postpartum, you can't get away with that. Like, in postpartum, you sweat more, there's more fluids. I mean, look at this. This is like a physical exercise, right?
Yeah, right.
So you can't get away with not wearing deodorant in postpartum. Although if you don't want to, that's fine. But when I found this product, I used it in pregnancy. It is the best deodorant I've ever tried. And I'm
Wow.
not just saying that just to say that. I mean, even my husband was like, you smell amazing. Like, I love this smell. What is it? I'm like, my deodorant. So it smells wonderful. It feels wonderful. It works. I've tried a lot of natural organic deodorants. They don't all work. So
Very
that's
true.
the other thing to keep in mind. And yeah, so I just wanted to really give you your praises and say how proud I am of the product.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I'd love to get your take on, odor down there too.
Yeah. Yeah. So my take on that, I will tell my patients, if the odor down there is strong enough that like you're smelling it through your clothes, like you're just sitting like this and you can smell like through your clothes and through like a distance like this, then you might want to go check that out with a provider. It could be bacterial vaginosis
Right.
that will heal on its own if you want to just let it, bacterial vaginosis isn't like a yeast infection where it has to be treated. A yeast infection, unfortunately, once you experience it, you have to take an antifungal. Bacterial vaginosis can sometimes run its course.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider. But odor down there is also very normal, especially like if you're just like, like if you can, if like you're like smelling something that had like been down there, for example, any products or undergarment or things like that. So it's not anything to be really concerned about. But it is really, really important to keep that area as dry as possible. That's why I love that this deodorant, you can put it anywhere you want externally.
Yeah.
Because I have definitely seen in practice like yeast growing in the groin, in the labias, things like that. So you want to keep yourself really truly as dry as possible down there. That includes applying this product, maybe not even putting on underwear so everything can breathe down there, or just making sure things are really dry before underwear gets put on and traps moisture. Some of my patients will sometimes like if they're like exercising or things like that. I'm sure you've heard like you can sweat a lot more through your clothes. And so this again, in situations where you're going to be having more exercise, this
Yeah.
product can be really wonderful. Let me go put her back down.
This is real life, baby.
Yeah. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to do this today.
No, I love it. I'm so glad that that we're doing it this way because this is real life. I mean, this is
Thank
not
you.
about being professional. This is about being
Thank
authentic and
you.
showing up just as we are. So this
And
is
I want to thank you so much for your patience through that and allowing me to just be as I am today. I
yeah,
really, really appreciate it.
absolutely, absolutely. Good. Well, I just wanted to, I'll also clarify, Hickey is not an antiperspirant. So we don't stop sweat. We are a deodorant because we don't have the active ingredient aluminum, right? Aluminum free, paraben free, baking soda free. So we are meant to mitigate the bacteria that causes the odor. And that's, I think, what people find of value
Right.
because you don't really want to put antiperspirant
Right,
down,
right.
right? That's not
Right.
it, it could cause irritation. So, but I love that you said that. We haven't talked about this. So this is the first time I'm hearing it. So it's definitely, it makes me feel good. And I really appreciate that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
good. Okay.
I love the product. I will definitely be ordering more. And I am so proud of the brand and what it stands for because we deserve to feel comfortable, and it makes a difference when you feel comfortable versus when you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah. And you shouldn't have to, have a deodorant that doesn't work. There are products out there that actually work. It's just finding the right one.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
good. Well, thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. That is my intention. My intention is to have a product where people feel good in their bodies, right?
Right.
That's the goal.
Right.
So tell people how they can find you and what services you are actually active and providing. And this is lovely.
Oh, thank you so much, Jessica. You can find me at the Postpartum Doctor on Instagram. That's kind of where I hang out the most.
Okay.
I love to chat with people in the DMs. So just DM me, even if you just want to have a conversation. It's I feel like a lot of clients, they come through because it's an energetic match, not so much because I have like deadlines, sign up by this date. It's like, yes, let's be in each other's world. So it has to start with, conversation. Right now, the Postpartum Abuse Mentorship Group Program is open. I'm opening up more slots for my one-on-one in the new year, and Expecting Together is coming out in January, which I'm so excited about.
Hey.
Because I have put a lot of work behind the scene during pregnancy and now on the content there. So, and then my website is thepostpartumdoctor.com. There's a contact form there as well.
That's lovely. Well, you'll have to come back maybe like the end of next year and talk about
I would
Expecting
love
Together.
to.
I'm excited to hear about that.
I would love to,
Good
yeah.
idea.
And I'll set myself up in my office with my good lighting and make sure, I'm busy.
I love you just the way you are. This has been perfect.
Thank you. Thank you
Love
so
it.
much for having me. And I look forward to hearing more of these episodes and more of your podcasts and following your work as well.
Yay. Thank you so much. We're proud of it. And I love to hear that. It keeps me going.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Wonderful.
Well, we will talk to you real soon.
Thank you.
So much.
All right. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye. Bye.